Hey everybody, I'm Jesse, producer of the No Quitting the Home Team podcast. I wanted to give a quick disclaimer in that while we hope anyone who listens would gain wisdom and insight from Dave and Renee's conversations, this is still a podcast intended for married couples, and to that end there will occasionally be dialogue around sexual intimacy and other related topics. So, for those of you who may be single and particularly sensitive to this subject matter, or those who may be listening at home or in the car with their kids around, we wanted to give you a heads up in advance so that you might continue listening at your own discretion.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to No Quitting the Home Team, a summer podcast on marriage. And I have to say, I think this is the last week we can say a summer podcast.
I think you're right.
Because we are recording on Thursday, and Monday is Labor Day. And just like white pants, after Labor Day, we can't say it's a summer podcast anymore. So, the last iteration of a summer podcast on marriage. And the fate of this podcast to be determined.
Ooh. Na-na-na.
Yeah, so welcome. I'm Renee.
I'm Dave.
I'm Jesse.
Hey, today on the show, we're going to have a special little tasty morsel for husbands out there to improve your marriage with your wife in a way that's super practical, that's very easy to follow, easy to understand, and it can literally change your marriage for the better. So stay tuned, especially for husbands. There's going to be something really tasty for you.
Could we call this a morsel marriage for dummies? Could it be under the marriage for dummies?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to be romantic. You can have zero emotional intelligence and get this, and your marriage will be better for it.
Nice.
Well, hon, tell me, how are you doing?
Well, it's been a few weeks since we recorded. I have had a migraine headache for 12 days.
Today's 12, yeah.
And it has been a little rough.
Do I need to turn the lights off in here? Would that be helpful?
Can you turn the air conditioner on?
Well, that's all people would hear.
So I feel like these last couple of weeks have been a little stressful for us.
Yeah.
Just when I do have migraine headaches periodically, but not usually in such long stretches. This is what I think. I think my body is tired of it being hot. It's rebelling. My body is so frustrated that of the COVID situation and what we're having to deal with again. And it just has had enough. And it just decided to hurt.
Yeah.
All day.
For
all
almost
night.
2 weeks.
Yep. I do have to say yesterday was the first day I didn't wake up with a splitting headache. And I made it until 3 o'clock before I had to take medicine. So.
And today you're feeling somewhat better.
I am. I pre-gamed with some extra strength Excedrin because I didn't want to get in here and end up laying on the floor with my hand pushed up against my right temple.
Yes.
So,
and word finding problems is your first issue with migraine. So
yeah, so it wouldn't have been a very verbose podcast for sure.
Definitely.
But it does affect us, I think, when I'm not very functional because I'm usually the get it done person.
Yeah. Your competence around the house is critical for Moreland Inc. to function.
Yeah, it's true.
I'm not saying that I'm incompetent. I'm just saying I'm less competent.
Yeah. And
so
I
for
tried
us to function well.
I tried to power through.
Yeah. No, you have.
But the efficiency takes a hit. So if you guys are praying people, please pray that these headaches go away. I did contact my doctor, and they think potentially it's a thing called cluster headaches, which we'll see.
Let's pray it's not.
Yeah, I know. It feels very migraine-y to me with the word finding problems and sensitivity to light and heat and all that. But anyway, it's made the last 2 weeks less enjoyable, I think, for us than normal.
Yeah.
But how are you?
I'm doing good. On the work front, we have a bunch of new staff,
Yeah, we do.
which has been much anticipated, and they're all here now. So it's fun having just the energy of new folks and other people with fresh legs coming in, joining arms, locking arms with us. So it's been good.
It's the reinforcements.
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Truly.
All right, so I think we're going to go to our segment on the surprise question. Just to remind you guys, this is a question that Dave and I toggle back and forth that the other one doesn't know what's coming. And today is Dave's turn to ask me a question.
All right, I've got a surprise question for you. Here it comes. Now, some background. You and I, we have talked about this periodically through our relationship, that you, just sort of
Oh, no.
observing, that you will get mad at me at least once a month, regardless of sort of other circumstances. There's just going to be a few days where you're going to be mad at me. And we've kind of talked about this, and kind of when you're not currently mad at me, we can kind of talk about sort of, remember a few weeks ago when I was mad at you, and we can kind of talk about that. That's sort of a regular, cyclical
There it is. We got there.
thing. And so now, doing marriage counseling for God's people over the years, this is a discussion that couples have.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So I suppose my question is, and I don't think I've ever asked you this before.
Oh, no.
Is when you are currently mad at me during that time, how self-aware are you? Like, do you know, like, I'm mad at Dave because there are other things going on in me right now? Or are you just legitimately mad at me? Like, how self-aware are you in that moment? And just to preface this, I would never and have never said, oh, in the moment,
Right,
Renee's mad at me. I've never
Because-
said, oh, Renee, you're just mad at me because
It's
it's,
right. Right.
yeah.
I think we've talked about, as someone who is pretty even, usually, emotionally, it's super frustrating to me that that's so volatile that time of the month.
Yes.
Right. We've talked about that.
Yes.
And a friend of mine, and I'm not going to mention her name because she listens and a lot of you know her, she thinks that is the only time of the month that we can fully express what's true. So, but I'm not there. There just is, I mean, maybe part of it is when you have the ability to buffer your emotions, you can just put up with more, right? So it's like when you aren't as volatile or having as extreme feelings around certain things. But you're right in the sense that you could be, I'll find something to be mad at you about. Sometimes there are legitimate things,
Well,
right? And sometimes
that's
there's
the
nothing.
confusing thing about it.
Right.
Is because
right.
you never make stuff up. I mean, I'm kind of fair. Like, there's, you look close enough. There's lots of things to be
Right.
sort of annoyed about with me or with anyone who you do
Right.
life with.
Totally.
Right? So whatever it is that you bring up, I can't remember a time when I thought it was illegitimate or not true. But it just,
So is it the only time of the month that it's raw enough that I can actually say it? And
Right.
that I don't temper it with niceties?
Well, or that it seems to be like there doesn't seem to be like a usually there's like a trigger that leads up to it.
Right.
It's like fine and then
Right.
not fine.
Right. I do have to say I think we have a good rhythm of you just let it burn. And you don't seek clarification. you get the deer in the headlights look, and you let it burn out.
That's right. Not to be reactionary.
And
in the moment.
you don't try to talk through it, and even after the fact, you're not like, so let's debrief about yesterday. Like you just kind of let it be what it is, which I think for us,
that seems to work
right.
pretty good. Yeah.
Right. I think in the moment, whatever it is that is provoking the anger, it's just more important to express it than to repress it. And I don't know why those couple of days that's the felt reality. In the rest of the month, that's not the felt reality.
But in the moment, that's just how you're feeling in the moment. Because sometimes I've heard you sort of reflect on previous sort of times, and you're like, oh, well, you almost talk kind of dismissively about those emotions that you had.
Yeah.
Like, and
Maybe a pseudo apology kind of.
Yeah, there's, I think some of that. But it's like, you can say it. I don't feel like
No, you can't say it.
I can say it.
No, you shouldn't.
And yeah.
No,
And
that would be like throwing a bomb into a burning building. That would not be good.
Yeah.
I think it's good to have. We've had conversations, and this could extend to a lot of different things. I think, again, as someone who's generally not very emotionally labile, it is frustrating when your life is really affected by hormones, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting you asked this question because I didn't know what you're asking, but the book recommendation is in this vein.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So, and even as people get older and when your desire is affected by hormones, that's another interesting sort of parallel that really has nothing to do with the quality of the relationship, but you just are affected by your body.
Right.
And I think it's a really healthy discussion for people to have and understand. I mean, even for you and husbands to not take it personally. Like it's a reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Thanks, Nate.
Yeah. Yeah. Moving on to our serious segment, but seriously though, our little teaser was interesting at the beginning. Our marriage wisdom for dummies. So, Dave, bring it.
So, here's a dynamic that couples find themselves in, especially guys. A guy will work his butt off to date, woo his future spouse, will pour an enormous amount of time, effort, money in getting this girl to pay attention to him, to like him, and then eventually to agree to marry him. And then once married, regular life rhythms begin to get locked into place. And then that effort to date, to woo his spouse begins to wane. Now, there is a marriage researcher, I've mentioned him before, Scott Halsman, and he has this I think super practical way of thinking about this dynamic, where he says, imagine if you are working in a company, and then all of a sudden you're in the company that you believe in, that you're kind of for, you believe in the values and what it is that your company does. But then all of a sudden on the first and beginning of the first third week of the month, when you normally would get paid, you just don't get paid anymore. How long do you think that employees will remain with that company even if they believe in the vision of the organization? And he says they're not going to last long at all. So with
So
that,
does he advocate paying your spouse twice a month?
Well, he calls this, and again, this is not romantic, but I do think it's
Practical.
It's remarkably practical and can be incredibly helpful, especially for guys who maybe are just kind of lower down on the EQ level. He calls it payday, and the question he challenges guys with is, what are the perks of being married to you? Like, do you just think that somehow showing up to your home every evening after work, that it's just your own presence by itself without any forethought, consideration of your wife and what she's gone through that day, that you just showing up is in and of itself a reward? He just challenges people, husbands, with that. And he says, what are the perks of being married to you? And so what he kind of challenges husbands to do, and I've challenged husbands to do this, is to think very practically within sort of a month-long period, what are you practically doing
That brings value to your spouse.
that shows your spouse you're thinking about her, that you love her, that you want her to remain with you, that what are the things that you're doing that sort of eradicates in her mind that maybe you're taking her for granted, or that relationship for granted, that you just always assume she's going to be there and nothing could ever change that. He's like, that is what gets couples, as a researcher, he said, this is what gets marriages stuck and heading on a downward trend pretty quickly. When guys, and he's calling out husbands in particular, where husbands just think that if they just show up, that's kind of the reward for their spouse in the marriage, without thinking more practically and asking, no, what am I doing, or what am I bringing that's actually a benefit, or he's a perk of being married to me? Like, what? So I love this way of thinking, and I kind of like it because it is romantic experientially, but it isn't romantic when you think about it and you call it in your mind perk or payday. It's very practical. But for me, it's helpful to go, okay, have I done anything for Renee in the past week or two that communicates to her that I love her, and that would communicate to her, like, hey, I'm kind of glad I married him.
So what are some things, I think I know kind of when this concept took root.
Yes.
So what are some things you do? What are some
well,
in reality, what do you do when you think, oh, I better...
The staple in our household is that I make you a latte every morning.
Right.
Have for years.
Right. Minus 2 days.
I've missed 2 days since Ian was born. Ian turns 15 this winter.
What's the deal, man?
So I've never missed except for 2 days in 15 years. I make you a latte every morning.
Right, he does.
Part of my thinking is, hey, if Renee ever wants to ditch me, she's gonna need to replace me with someone who's gonna give her a latte every morning. And I don't think that guy's out there. So there are drawbacks of being married to me, but there's a daily perk.
Yeah. You started getting me flowers too regularly, and not that not that many years ago.
No, a few years ago. But we're at least once or twice a month. I'm coming home with flowers.
Does the motivation from that fit into that framework, the Payday framework?
Partially. I think part of the motivation is that I don't want to take my relationship with you for granted. And so I do want to do something that communicates you're special. And me just coming home tired, weighed down from work, that by itself, if that's all you ever get from me, that's actually taking you for granted and our relationship for granted. So I just want to do something that kind of gets me out of that sort of rhythm and communicates to you you're special. Now, the unromantic part of this is
the discipline of it.
Is the discipline of it and the calendaring of it.
Right.
And that's why I do actually like the Payday. Like, I get paid twice a month. We get it and every time we get paid, it's sort of another reminder, like, hey, I'm valued. The church values me, and it sort of invigorates my commitment to the mission of this particular church. And so while it's, of course, some of it's obviously different, there is just a practical nature of a couple times a month, I need to do this for you. And that's another way to protect our relationship, because I don't want some schmuck coming into your life who you would be able to you'd be able sort of even in your mind to go like, gosh, it sure would be nice to have someone think so highly of me, or like, this is how affairs happen.
Right.
And I've seen it happen just enough for me to go, I'm not going to take anything for granted. Anyway, so the concept is Payday, and I encourage husbands in particular to do it, especially if your behavior towards your spouse after marriage is distinctly different than what it is before marriage.
Yeah, that's great. Great stuff.
Thoughts on that?
I agree that when I feel special 20 years in is a hugely bonding aspect of our relationship. And I think a lot of people don't feel that on the other side of marriage. And I think to intentionally make deposits toward that is, and it can go both ways.
Yeah.
What Payday looks like.
Next episode? Question mark?
Okay. No, I think that's great. I think, and I do think it should go both ways, and think it just looks, and in each relationship it looks different, right? And the dynamic of each marriage looks different. But the concept of intentionally making your spouse feel special during the mundaneness of life is just an important concept to integrate. Right.
And it's one where the reason why I mention husbands in particular is because I don't want to just create another expectation that then doesn't get met.
Right.
So I think each spouse individually, this is not something for them to expect from each other.
Yeah.
But rather something for them to take ownership for themselves.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Cool.
Thanks, son.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the easiest section of our podcast. What's weird about us?
Oh my gosh. So,
we've already talked about our weird golf obsession. We're going to expand on that a little bit today.
Yeah, you are.
So we love live sports, any sport really, and
live sports takes up too much of our time together. Yesterday, tell them.
Well, yesterday was the beginning of Division I football.
Why, yes, it was.
And so it was a Wednesday. It was, just so you know, it's a Wednesday night, which isn't football night in America. And
so what do we do? What do we do?
Well,
on a school night.
On a school night, first of all, I buy a bottle of wine, which I'm not supposed to during the week.
We don't do it on a school night generally.
Nope. But I did. And I'm ashamed to say this. I told the boys that we have family devotionals in the evening.
After dinner.
I canceled the family devotional.
Unbelievable.
To watch Jacksonville State
Play University of Alabama, Birmingham.
Yep.
It was the worst football game I've ever watched, and I have no regrets.
Yeah, nor should you.
So we were looking at each other as we don't know what our kids were doing. We were in our bedroom watching the game.
At like 6:30 p.m. on a school night. And what was so weird, during dinner time, we were saying, hey, the game's on. And then Beckett looked at me with these just doe eyes going, oh, okay, so is this going to be after devotionals?
To which Dave says, we're going to skip devotional tonight. We'll do it tomorrow. This is a problem.
Yeah.
Sweet Bex.
We've got some we have to watch the Dragons of
the UAB.
Jacksonville, or what were they?
It was Jacksonville State.
Yeah, and I thought it was Jackson State. I thought we were going to see Deion Sanders' team.
coached the team.
No.
So this is not only weird, this is problematic, and we need an intervention.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I was expecting repentance. Is like, do I need to bring Beckett in here? Like,
Yeah. No, I don't know if it's just one of those kind of things we just are permissive on to ourselves, but
It's weird.
Yeah, it
I
was
think
a
even
Wednesday
as a
night.
wife, it's none of my friends understand. They always default to me like, oh, she knows sports. Renee's the sports person. And so I think it's actually weird, even more so for me, that I'm as into it as you are.
Right. And I was getting a little tired, like around the third quarter.
No, but
and,
I wanted
and
to
you
finish
were
it.
like, "Are you going to fall asleep?"
I did. I was like,
It was 31-0,
yeah.
hey,
and you were like, "Are
I
you
was
going to fall
chiding him
asleep
for
in this?"
falling asleep during the.
hey, the Falcons were up 28-3 in the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl.
That's true. That's true.
Sorry, Falcons fans.
All right, so our true weird confessions. All right, last but certainly not least, we're going to end with some book recommendations. Dave, why don't you go first, and I'll.
First
it
one
up.
is a quick read that's very meditative and beautifully written. It's called The Liturgy of the Ordinary by Trish Warren.
Tish.
Tish, yep.
Oh,
Yeah, it's Tish, yeah.
Trish.
Sorry, Tish.
Sorry about that. It is a beautiful depiction of how you can connect with God doing regular things. So the first chapter is she describes the process of waking up. And I don't think I've ever read something that that describes so beautifully the common process of just waking up in the morning and what it means to come into God's presence. I've just never read anything quite like that before, and it's always stuck in my mind. I read it 2 or 3 years ago, and in that book, I've always just appreciated how she described ordinary, mundane things as opportunities to connect with God.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of falls alongside of other spiritual classics. The Imitation of Christ being sort of by Thomas à Kempis being another one where it kind of describes cleaning up, cleaning the floors as these sort of intimate times with God. But Tish Warren, Liturgy of the Ordinary, I recommend it.
And I think there is a crossover element because so much of marriage is just ordinary stuff.
Absolutely.
And I think we live for the sensational and we live for the profound, but to be able to bask in sort of the beauty of the ordinary is also very helpful in marriages. That's one, when we were talking about our book recommendations, I actually almost chose that one today as well. So that's one we both really love and is really helpful.
Mm-hmm. What do you have, hon?
So this book was one that I read with my book club, and then I handed it to Dave and I said, "You have to read this." And he read it, and I think no other book has engendered such empathy from you than this book. And it's called, and this may be more for people, couples in their mid-30s, 30s or 40s or older, but it's called Why We Can't Sleep by Ada Calhoun. And it really, I think for the first time after Dave read it, the look on your face was you were just like, I can't believe this is what you guys have to go through. Because it was, I think in relationships, empathy's hard, right? Because we always see things from our perspective. We always have our own viewpoint. And to actually put yourself in another person's shoes is so, so very difficult to do, right?
Right. And it's so like the hormonal difference between men and women is so significant. And a lot of the book is about menopause and premenopause.
But it's not just that. It's sort of about even sociological realities of women in their 30s and 40s and what we're dealing with, you know, whether it's caring for children and caring for parents, or even just the expectations.
And to have your own business and
right,
do it
and
all.
the expectations of Gen X women, and culturally what we've sort of, as the first generation of women who could technically do it all, we as a generation are expected to do it all. I just think there's not been another book in our marriage that produced such empathy and really changed how you treated me and viewed me in certain areas.
Yeah. It really was a true mindset shift for me.
Dramatic.
Yep.
So I think, like I said, particularly if you as a couple are in your 30s or 40s, it was a really, really helpful work for us personally. And I think there's been a lot of fruit from you reading it as well, and me reading it, obviously. But it's Why We Can't Sleep by Ada Calhoun.
All right. Thanks, Nay. Well, guys, thanks for listening, and hope you check out the next podcast soon. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Dear